Hello, beloved ones. We're back. It's time for Agape. And so excited to be with you today. We've got a really full show, and this is an important show. We're going to get into some really important topics, and we've got a very special guest who I'll introduce here shortly. Yeah, I feel burdened today as we approach this particular topic, and we're asking the Lord for His intervention in all that's happening right now in our state. And of course, if you don't live in the state of Minnesota, this is important for you as well, because it could come to your state. And so it's good to be educated and aware. I want to bring on three of my favorite people in the world, my co-hosts, Darren and Luca. And I also want to introduce a dear friend of mine, Bonnie Gasper, and she's a part of the Child Protection League. And I consider CPL a sister ministry of Agape First. We're so like-hearted, and we're just on the same team. So it's so great to have you on today, Bonnie. Can you share a little bit about yourself and CPL, and what is that?
Absolutely. Well, I share the same affection and love for all of you guys. I just am so honored to be here today, and I just appreciate so much the work that you folks are doing. And we really are partners, because it's all about these kids, and our hearts are the same for them, and to protect them and save them from this ideology and these lies that are coming to them. So me personally, I'll just share really briefly. I have been involved in this battle for a long time, actually. It's been about 23 years. Started thinking about that one day, thinking, how did I ever get into this thing? But it was way back when my oldest daughter was getting ready for kindergarten. And I started looking at what's being taught in the schools, and I realized this didn't look like anything I had been exposed to when I was in public school. And that was just kind of the end of it. I was watching something on TV, and it was literally a documentary about Martin Luther King's father. And he had a little plaque on his desk that said, "If you see a good fight, get in it." And I was just convicted by the Holy Spirit. Man, I had to get involved in this fight. So here I am 23 years later. So Child Protection League, then I've been on the board with them for 10 years. We formed back in 2013. And I get the liberty here today to introduce our brand new mission statement to you as well. We have been working on refining our mission and our goals and our objectives as well. So I don't have it memorized. I'll have to read it to you. But CPL promotes the welfare of children and protects them from exploitation, indoctrination, and violence. We educate citizens on issues that protect or threaten the safety of children. We equip and activate parents and the public to reclaim self-governance and to expose and defeat the cultural revolution in our midst. And then one thing people don't really ever hear is kind of what our vision is. So what we really want to emphasize as our vision is that parents are engaged and in control of their children's upbringing, that schools are fully transparent and responsive to the public about their curriculum, practices, and policies, that parental rights are protected and respected, that parents and children can freely express their political beliefs, moral standards, and their faith, that they are physically safe, their innocence and personal privacy is protected, and that they just receive an academically focused education, free from all this Marxist stuff and unscientific ideologies. So that's really what our long-term vision is for our work and what our group does. And so because of that, then it concentrates on public policy, legislation, cultural trends, and most definitely the curriculum, which impacts kids, because the whole world right now is really indoctrinating our kids.
Oh, I love it. I have goosebumps. That's really good. I love that. I love that quote. If you see a good fight, get in it.
I thought that it was like, it just convicted me, and it's just stuck with me ever since. This is a good fight, you guys. We're in a good fight.
Yeah, we're fighting for the kids, for children.
Right.
And I remember, I grew up, I went to grade school, like 30 years ago. I don't know how long, but it was essentially, almost a one-room schoolhouse on the plains of Western North Dakota.
Wow.
We learned reading, we learned writing, we learned arithmetic. There was not a shred of any kind of social agenda. There was nothing. Like, there was no sex ed. We just learned how to read and write, and they did a good job teaching those things.
Right.
So, getting from there to where we're at now, it's really mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we didn't get in the fight.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Or we lost didn't.
Well, and part of that too, I think, Luca, was that a lot of people weren't aware of what was going on. I think there was, having been in this as long as I have, just what's happened even in the last 20 years. When Johnny comes home with an A and there's no issues and he's playing sports and all that kind of, parents just don't lift the hood and look underneath. They just were not. They said everything's fine. It all looks good. They had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
And it was really COVID that really, just kind of blew that whole lid off that thing. Parents were seeing when they saw the Zoom material coming over their kids' computer in their bedrooms, they were like, hold on,
wait a minute.
Not okay. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a kind of a great awakening among parents, but it's it's a little late, but better late than never. So
yeah,
right.
Well, I want to get into our topic for today. As you know, Minnesota has seen a flood of legislation come forth these past few months, and we've all done our part to stand against it, speak against it, rally people, and one of the most insidious, I'm just going to be honest, bills that we brought to the attention of our constituency we called it the kidnapping bill. That's what we called it, because it was legislation that essentially made the state of Minnesota a sanctuary state for children who are seeking gender affirming care. Now, when you hear that on the front end, you're like, oh, care. Well, what's wrong with care? But what we're really talking about is cross-sex hormones, puberty blocking drugs, all of which have devastating effects on the bodies of young children. Most of them are sterilized. There's this horrible things that happen from these drugs. And then, of course, that all leads up to gender reassignment surgery, which we don't feel, and yeah, right, quotes, we don't feel children should, be able to make those kinds of decisions. And so all around the state of Minnesota, these states are outlawing these kinds of things for children, but we decided that we should actually make this a law. Now, what happened, and maybe you're aware of this, maybe you're not, last Wednesday, March 8th, Governor Walz usurped his legislature and signed this law just did an executive order, and made this law, which we all kind of found perplexing. We're not quite sure why. It was kind of, all this stuff is sailing through the legislature right now. But he usurped all of that and decided to make this the law. So we have it up on the screen here. The executive order protecting and supporting the rights of Minnesota's LGBTQIA plus community members to seek and receive gender affirming healthcare services. So that's what we're talking about today. And I'm interested in any initial thoughts that the panel might have just on the front end. There's so much we can get into.
So much.
Bonnie,
Well,
first.
I'll say one thing here that I found very interesting about this document when I read through it. He uses the term gender affirming healthcare 25 times in this document. And he uses the phrase medically necessary 9 times. So when you think about that, he's painting this picture that somehow these kids are they're desperate, right? This is life. If they don't get this kind of care, their lives might end tomorrow. Medically necessary to me invokes a sense of this is like urgent, right? It's like an emergency ambulance on the way, right? that's by design, you guys. That is
Right.
by design to make this take on a whole different meaning and perception, because that's one thing these Marxists like Walz have done and how they've changed education. They've just corrupted the language. I mean, we're using the same vocabulary, but they have a totally different dictionary. And so when you really think about every single word in that phrase, gender, they redefined gender.
Yep.
They've redefined affirming.
Yep.
Right? This is not affirming. They're affirming a lie. These kids are
Right.
not being able to change their sex. And
Mhm.
and since when did the mutilation and sterilization of children become healthcare? I mean,
Yeah.
to me, I'm thinking, how on earth did we get to this place so fast?
Mhm.
But I mean, so I think right out of the gate, that is something, you know, as we talk to people and we try to educate people, they cannot buy into this language because it is completely false.
Right.
We have to rescue these kids from this it's a whole world of lies
It
that they're
is.
living in right now.
And do you think that this is a really great point? Do you think that parents are kind of being duped by this language? You know, the doctors are saying this is medically necessary. Your child could lose their life. And so do you think that that's happening? You know,
I do,
Yeah.
especially with parents who have children who are struggling in this issue. I think they are definitely being duped because they're always under that threat of, if you don't do this, you'd rather have a live son, right, than a dead, you know, daughter, right? I mean,
Right.
that's always the choice that they're given. But it was Dr. Michelle Cretella who made a really great point to me. I was listening to one of her presentations last fall, and she goes, "Since when did we let the suicidal patient dictate the care?"
Ooh, come
Ooh,
on.
that is such a good point, right?
Wow.
And we have turned everything on its head. So we're letting these kids who are clearly, if they truly are suicidal, then why are we turning over their care direction to them? It's a
Yeah.
complete dereliction of duty.
Mhm.
Well, and what I find interesting is that, you know, a teacher cannot give a student an aspirin for a headache.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know, but there's this whole sphere where they're able to, you know, whether it's the abortion or the, you know, stuff that they want to hand out regarding sexuality and sex and all of this, and now transgender care. I don't know. I do this for a living, and I can't get my mind around it.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
They're playing on the one thing I've noticed with the liberal people is that they play on emotions. You know, like you just said, healthcare. No, it's not healthcare. It's brutality. It's sterilization. It's
Mhm.
really basically murdering a generation. And that's how they get you. They start playing on your emotions and saying, well, this kid is going to commit suicide if we don't, you know, affirm them in their illusion of pretending to be somebody else, when really we're just condoning to the butchering of these children.
Mhm.
And you
Yeah,
got to deal with facts. You know, let's see the facts. Let me see
Right.
the real peer review facts behind this. There are none.
Right. I titled the episode "Legislating Child Abuse,"
Yeah.
and because you know, when I think, okay, we are going to allow an adult to do something to a child that will most likely sterilize them, that will not solve the problem that, you know, that's really going on, and then we're going to cut off healthy body parts. How can that be anything other
Yeah.
than child abuse? I don't know any other way to look at it.
You know what it really is? It's modern day eugenics is really what it is.
Mhm.
These interventions are simply the sterilization and mutilation of emotionally disturbed kids. That's
Yeah.
really what it is. I mean, and this used to be illegal. I mean, they did this at one point in our history, right? Remember those,
Mhm.
and we're doing it again. And we're doing it to emotionally damaged children who really need help. And we're banning, and they're banning the help that they really need, like talk therapy and counseling from their faith community and all of that kind of stuff, right?
Mhm. Right.
Darren.
One
They
of
really-
the things that stuck out to me is the word healthcare.
Mm.
And there's nothing healthy about any of the choices that they're making. Every one of the choices has significant destructive consequences.
Right.
And, when people say that, someone in the medical field that, do no harm, the cross-sex hormones is addicting them to that for the rest of their life. They have to keep going for their entire life. And if you look at the horrible thing that they do for a woman who wants to become a man, and the surgery of gender transition or gender affirming, I don't want to scare the people by showing them pictures, but they shave off the muscle and the skin off of the forearm and to create parts of the body that will never function.
Never.
And that'll be a scar that'll be there forever. It never grows back. It never works. And for the men, your body tries to heal things that it says that it knows are holes in the body.
Correct.
And for someone who transitions, so to speak, to a woman from a man and does bottom surgery, for example, that's something that's going to require maintenance for the rest of their life because it's not natural to their body.
Right.
And the drugs, where they're destructive, they're not FDA approved for children to gender transition. There's literally no science to support this. We're just jumping into it, an ideological or religious belief that, you can do whatever you want to your body to affirm what it is your thoughts are about yourself, and that's loving and caring towards the children. And there's one more thing I want to say is I've taken pastoral call with a father recently who had his child transitioned behind his back at school. And he had said that the student came home with a PowerPoint saying that this person is no longer going by this name, but by that name. And I'm no longer, let's just say your daughter, but I'm your son. And in the PowerPoint, they had the, points. And one of the points was, well, Jesus is okay with this. I've talked to Jesus. The student's 9 years old. And Jesus, coming up with religious determination that, well, Jesus says this is okay. And Dad, I realize you're going to have to grieve the loss of your child, but LOL, I never was, your daughter anyways.
Yeah.
Oh my.
And so even in the PowerPoint, they recognize that you have to grieve the loss of a child. And this happened at school, like 9-year-olds doing PowerPoint.
Right. Right.
They're not the only ones doing this. They're not getting groomed by their parents or led by their parents. They're being groomed at school.
Right.
And this kind of bill or this executive order says that this is expected, that all these medical associations are behind this. Trust the experts. How many times have we heard that? Trust the experts. And what this will end up doing is it's going to criminalize parents that don't want this for their children, but they're going to have to do it because the state, if you read that executive order, he makes it clear that the state protects children and against harm, and that this is good. And what we're suggesting is harmful. So this is where it's going, is that they're stepping in between the child and the parent and saying, we know what's best for your children.
Right. And I think, and Bonnie, I think you said something too about this in one of your teachings on the CPL Rumble page about children are like wet cement, right? They're so impressionable that anything that lands on them makes an impression, right? So, like Darren's saying, they keep filling this garbage into their head. They're gonna. That's the whole thing. Is the narrative is to turn the children against the parents and make the children believe that they're loved and cared for by this narrative and the state, when really they're not. They're the enemy, if you will. I mean, really, the real enemy is we battle not against flesh and blood, but powers and principalities, right?
Yeah.
And that was really impactful when you said that.
Well, in both of those points, both what you said and both what Darren said are so key, because we're talking about minor children here. I mean, that's what's so really creepy and scary about this legislation and this executive order. We're not talking about adults who have the cognitive function to understand what long-term sterility looks like, what that really means for them. We're talking about kids who still believe in Santa. You know? I mean, these are kids who still think that a guy in a red suit flies around and drops off presents for every kid in the world, or they're unicorns. They can't separate reality from
what?
Mhm.
you know. So if one day they think, oh, I kind of feel like I feel like Ariel, you know,
Yeah.
you know, no, you're not a girl. You
Yeah.
know?
Right.
But it's just like, but to indulge this and to just put the brakes and just to eliminate and stop and just and the only thing he's got in here too, it's only affirming. There's only one path these kids are put on. There's only one path. And because these kids aren't able then to make these decisions, to make a fully informed decision, they clearly cannot do that. They can't drink, smoke, vote. They can't even cross the street, half of them by themselves. And we're eliminating the parental right to direct their well-being and their health and their care. I mean, you like Darren said, you've got two parents. One parent might want this, but the other parent's rights are completely violated.
Yeah.
And Minnesota's going to step in that, and the Minnesota is going to step in the mess of that and not recognize the laws in the other state, the parental rights in the other state, the child rights. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, Bonnie, I want to expound on that because you hit on one of the points that we're going to make today is that with his executive order and the intent of the bill, but he's just straight up telling his executive branch to not uphold the subpoena and extradition laws.
Right.
That other states, and he mentions it in his executive order, that other states, have passed laws that no, you can't do this to children. And it's a crime in other states to take your child to a state to do this to them.
Right.
So where is it? Tennessee or Florida? I think was the most recent one. And so for a parent, if you have two parents, one wants to transgender the child, the other one doesn't, they can't do it in Florida. What Walz is saying is, hey, you can come here. We'll be a sanctuary state for transgendering your child.
Yeah.
So when Nate said it's a child kidnapping bill, it's because it's illegal in Florida, but they can come here and do it. And then if Florida says, hey, that's a criminal, send them back to us. That's the law, is that we would have to do that. That's the law right now. But Walz is telling his executive branch, well, we're not going to uphold that law. We're not going to participate with subpoenas or with extraditions. So he's technically breaking the Constitution, his oath to the Minnesota Constitution to uphold the law.
Yeah.
He's changing the law and choosing which laws he's going to uphold. So he's disqualified from running. He's disqualified from being a governor, technically.
I would agree with that. In fact, on his EO, the very last point on 6, he talks about that very thing. In fact, he says he gives the Minnesota Attorney General, he can exercise his discretion to decline requests for the arrest or surrender of any person charged with a criminal violation of a law of another state.
Wow.
Honestly.
Yep. And so what he did is he put into effect House File 146. He put it into effect. He's like, I don't even need you to pass a law. I'm going to dictate as a tyrant and say, we're not going to uphold the law as it is.
Right.
And he's saying, well, we're doing this to protect children. It doesn't matter. It's unconstitutional. The people get to decide what the health of our children is, not him.
Right.
But that's what tyrants do. He's lawless.
We saw the same thing with COVID. He passed an executive order, which isn't law, by the way. It's not a law. Right. And like you said, Darren, he's breaking the Constitution, and we don't have to. I mean, how do you not? That's where I'm wrestling with, is what do we do with the fact that he's breaking the law and we don't have to abide by that? And I've said it for a long time, the way to end this thing is to start having mass legal suits against these people individually.
Yeah. And technically, the counties are the ones who would hold the governor accountable. And so they could hold a grand jury and take this executive order, compare it against the Constitution, find that he's violated the Constitution and his oath, and their grand jury could find that he should be removed from office for breaking his oath. And then if 51% of the counties did that, he would be disqualified from office. That's the county commissioners. 80% of the counties in Minnesota are red. So So I'll just throw that out there.
So there's
that's
the
how
point. You hit this thing
law.
at.
That sounds like a strategy that needs to be developed.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's my question, and we kind of have already alluded to this. How did we get here in the first place? It seems like this has ramped up, and we're at warp speed. It's like gasoline on a fire. 10 years ago, nobody would have dreamed of doing these things to children. What's happened? Bonnie, do you have any thoughts on what's going on?
Yeah, I have a whole presentation on this, but it's basically the Marxification of education. That's really what has happened here. And it's been going on for decades. I mean, well over 50, 60 years. There was an Italian communist by the name of Antonio Gramsci way back when who understood that the way to capture the center of any revolution was the culture. It wasn't the economics, it was the culture. And the way to overthrow the culture was to capture the children. If you change the way they think and speak, then you will affect, social change. And in his point, it was revolution. So once you change how kids think and how they speak, they throw off what they've learned from their parents. They throw off their faith. They have this whole new worldview that's been infused in them, and they live according to that worldview. So it's just been this gradual, it's just in the progression of it. He's credited with the long march of the institutions, right? I mean, that's who he is. And so when you look at all the institutions that have been captured, I mean, it's been our government, our schools, our culture, Hollywood, media. I mean, all of it has been captured. It's all talking the same narrative now, because all of these kids who have been indoctrinated and immersed in that went on to graduate. They're in positions of influence and power. They've got the same worldview now that is being poured down through their organizations, even through the banks, right? The recent bank failure that failed. I mean, they were totally a woke bank, but it's the same kind of people that were leading that kind of operation. So it's just been this continual, they play the long game, right? They play the long game, and our churches have really failed to meet the charge, right? The churches have just put their heads in the sand and have not addressed this thing head on like they should have. Francis Schaeffer warned about this a long time ago, and we did not get in the fight.
And finally, to your point about the changing the culture from the inside in the long game, that's also happened in the churches.
Yes, it has.
The seminaries were radicalized, I would say, with false doctrines.
Yes, it has.
And then you create leaders in the church that carry on those false doctrines and sow them in, and they get deeper and deeper and pacifying the church. Oh, well, we can accept this. This is where the culture is. We need to meet the culture where it's at and be, et cetera, et cetera. And so that kind of thing just keeps leaning you farther and farther away from the truth, to where we're now debating whether or not we're going to use, allow openly gay people leadership in church, and if we're going to support people as transgender because that's the most loving thing to do. I mean, these are the debates that are happening in denominations right now.
I know.
Splitting denominations.
They have drag queens giving children's sermons. I mean, you're absolutely right there, and that is what's happened. But so our kids they've just been groomed. It's been primarily through the curriculum, but it's also been through church, faith. I mean, let's just face it, not a lot of people have a Christian biblical worldview anymore. And very few that do, they're getting swamped from within as well. But you've got, teachers. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw that Alpha News article about that Mounds View elementary teacher last week, who came out and said, I don't know, she doesn't identify as a male or female, but her goal was to confuse the children.
Yes.
That was her goal, was to confuse the children. So you've got you got a lot of militant kind of teachers now coming out too that are in I mean, they're bent on doing this and confusing the children. Social media has been just a social contagion in this area. Kids that are hurting or lonely or isolated, they're finding these chat groups. I mean, there's groups that have millions and millions of followers on these trans sites or whatever they are. I mean, it's just unbelievable the kind of traction that it's gotten. But our kids are so impressionable, and they all want to be loved and accepted, and they're looking for acceptance. And there's a lot of data on these children that the vast majority of them have all kinds of comorbidities in terms of whether it's autism or Asperger's or, you know, some kind of traumatic event in their lives. And these things are unchecked and they just get into they get on this fast track, this high speed train of gender affirming if they decide, well, this is going to make me happy and this is the way I go. And then nobody puts the brakes on.
I think it's important too, you know, to remember that it's not, you know, people often I see posts about people getting angry at, you know, these gay people, they're just dirtbags and, you know, and it's, you know, they're brainwashed. They can't, it's not like they decided to, you know, but it's a spiritual thing and there's a narrative that's pushing behind it and it's demonic. It's not, it's really not their fault. Right. You know, so we could be easy on people that are trapped in this. But I think it's really good that we're having a conference coming up.
Yeah, you know, and that's something that we'd like to really make clear at Agape First is that we make a distinction between people and agendas.
Yes.
And you know, we love people, you know, and we love to minister to people. And get to know people and hear their stories and all of that. But we also understand that there are some very evil agendas, and they're after our children. And those are the things that we stand against and speak out against. Well, Bonnie, what's going on at CPL now? Is there any way that people can support what you guys are doing or get involved or just stay more connected to you guys?
Oh, we're always looking for, you know, support. But I mean, I think the best way to stay connected to us is to get onto our website, which is just childprotectionleague.com, and sign up for our email updates. And we don't sell our lists. We do not sell our lists, but we just send out, you know, information, and it's very well researched. It's always sourced and cited, and it's a pretty massive list, and we get a lot of and they get shared, I mean, thousands and thousands of times. So it's a good way to get information that way. And we always, you know, we're a nonprofit, 501c3, just as you are as well. And so we, you know, I don't know if you guys saw the BLM list of donations yesterday, the $82 billion.
Yeah, right?
Wait, say that again. What was that? What was that?
$82 billion.
Yep.
Went to Black Lives Matter?
Went to Black Lives Matter.
General Michael Flynn had that on his True Social.
Imagine what you could do with $1 billion, Nate.
Just one billion.
Share that with you. We could be pretty effective.
Hey, Bonnie.
Yep.
What's your website address?
Childprotectionleague.com.
Childprotectionleague.com.
Yes. The short version is cplaction.com.
Got it.
Yep, and you can get there. But yeah, so we're just, I mean, this is kind of an interesting period here too. We're in the midst of this legislature, right? Everything that we've been fighting for 10 years, the comprehensive sex ed, the critical race theory, you know, the wokeism, I mean, all this kind of stuff. I mean, there's no way to stop it right now. We just don't have any way to stop it. Yeah. So we have many people coming to us like, why aren't you having a rally, or why aren't you doing this? It's like, well, we're not so sure a rally is effective at this point. Yeah. We really are encouraging people. It's time to really, you kind of got to, I don't want to say withdraw, but it's time to just really make sure you shore up your own family. Make sure you shore up your own family, shore up your own kids. Really evaluate and assess if public school is for you or not, and especially if you're a Christian parent. It's just toxic. I can't think of any redeeming qualities right now about the public school, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. We've seen enough that, you know, as parents, biblically, we are called to raise them up and train them on the way they should go, right? And to teach them the ways of the Lord, and to love them with their whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. And there's nothing in public school that's doing that. So those are some decisions that might have to be made. And then, you know, I think some parents, we got to start really being proactive about this. I mean, how about having some Constitution, you know, times rather than reading a drag queen book? Why don't you start reading some of these fun little stories about kids that, you know, the Revolutionary War stories, or get them up in, you know, let them understand their history. Yeah. You know, have people tutor. I mean, there's so many skill sets that are not being used. We're finding so many parents during COVID, especially as some got small little one real hub put together, and they co-opted together and taught. So it worked really, really well. So, I mean, there's
I
just
love
so many
that.
things people can do.
I love that idea. Yeah, it's really time to. We really do. That is just a really good advice, Bonnie, and I wholeheartedly agree. We have got to shore up our families. Our families. I mean, at the end of the age, God's strategy to defeat the Antichrist and his kingdom is the restoration of the family. And so I'm hopeful in times like this because I know that God's going to do it in the end. But it gives us a little perspective into why there is such a demonic war against parents and families, because that's what's going to defeat the enemy. So, but God wins at the end, and we're excited about that. Darren.
Yeah, well, before we go, I wanted to leave the parents with some science. I'll show you here. So the American Psychiatric Association, the one that Walz is quoting, and the American Psychological Association concur that it is not the case that individuals transgender identity are born that way and can't change. According to their handbook, 75% or more of gender dysphoric boys and girls accept their chromosomal sex by adolescence or adulthood. Mm-hmm. And so this was their statement in 2014. Mm-hmm. And so you can go to therapyequality.org to get more information. But as of 2014, transgenderism was something that the majority of people would grow out of. Mm-hmm. But yes. Now we're seeing I think 2019, we saw 4,000% increase in mm-hmm. girls identifying as transgender. And the good news is that the people who are detransitioning that were children 5 years ago and now are adults and saying that they had no understanding of what they were committing to.
Right.
And at least in the UK, they shut down their transgender clinic because their Supreme Court found that children can't make this decision and then it's harmful to children. So the US is a little bit behind on this, but we've, just a couple days ago was Detransition Day. Detransitioner Day. I don't know if you knew that. Chloe Cole.
Oh yeah, Chloe.
She had the Detransition Day Awareness Day. Detransition Awareness Day. It was a couple days ago, and so there is a movement of people who have been part of the early onset of the transgender ideology, taking kids, and they're coming out of it saying, no, this is not what I wanted. I was not informed. I was rushed through it.
Right.
And now you got kids, they go see one Planned Parenthood therapist, and they're like, yeah, it sounds like you need, medicine, and then addicting them for the rest of their life to that. So
what happened to consent and inform? That's what they're supposed to do, is inform people of the side effects to these drugs, and that information is being kept from them.
So,
all for the sake of money.
And one thing to add to your point too, this was such an excellent point that Dr. Cretella made at the conference, was because they're targeting kids younger and younger and younger. You're exactly right, Darren. If you did a watchful waiting approach, the vast majority of these kids become comfortable in their biological gender by the time they get through puberty. But if you abrupt puberty, if you stop them from having puberty, it's basically a chemical castration for boys, and you put girls in early menopause. That's really what happens. So if you rob them of that time, even if it's a little bit of time, you're talking about bone density, testosterone, brain development, all this kind of stuff, that it's almost 100% guarantee that once kids, if their puberty's been blocked, cross-sex hormones, it's almost 100% they're going to go on to some kind of surgery, because they come out of that, even if they had regrets, their body has already been changed, and they did not experience the normal development period that they should have had, and it's gone. That window of opportunity is gone.
Yeah.
They're lying. The people that are pushing this healthcare on children are lying when they say that these things can be reversed. That they have
they can't be reversed.
Straight up lying. They're liars.
Lies.
And so, yeah.
Well, it reminds me, Jesus had a very strong woe to those who harm children. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, kind of what I want to say at the end here. This matters to God.
Yes.
It breaks his heart, and it matters enough that Jesus said something about it. And when Jesus says something, we should pay attention. And he said, if any one of you causes one of these little ones to stumble, it would be better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck and thrown into the sea. I mean, that's a powerful picture of how God feels when children are harmed. And so and I think I speak for all of us here, our heart is that we would protect children. That's right in the name of CPL. We want children protected, and we want them to flourish. We want them to thrive. And we know that that's possible if they get the help that they need when they need it, the right kind of help. And of course, we believe that a biblical, traditional kind of help is, and I mean, when I say traditional, I'm like, since the beginning of time. I mean, this is what we're drawing from here. It's only been the last how many years that this whole trans thing, has been the issue that it is today. So, for hundreds and thousands of years before that, it was the family unit.
Yes.
So let's go with what's tried and true and what we know works. If you are a parent and you have a prodigal, or if you're a grandparent or a friend or a brother or a sister, we have a conference coming up that we want to make you aware of. It's called Let It Be Together. And that simply is when we cross the finish line into heaven, we want it to be together with all of those that we love. And as a parent, I want it to be with my kids. So this conference is helping your prodigal return to joy. We're going to share a lot of really helpful information about how to just come alongside of those who may be wayward or struggling. We are going to say a few things about the transgender agenda. It's not specific to that issue, but we do feel like that particular issue is the enemy's just really using that to come after our kids. So we are to say a few things about that. But whatever the thing is that your loved one is struggling with, this conference is going to be helpful. So if you would just go to our website, www.agapefirstministries.org, and you can go to our events page to register. The conference is free of charge. We just want to get this information out. But we do hope that you would register, because that just makes it easier for us to plan. And it's March 24th and 25th. So it's just coming up here in just a week and a half, but there's definitely time to do that. We've got some other really great events coming up, and you can find out all that information on our website. And you can sign up for our newsletter as well, and donate to the ministry. All of those things can happen there. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Bonnie, for coming on today. What a joy. Thank you for your fight. Thank you for saying yes, because it is a good fight. And, when we realize that we're not alone in the fight, I think that, there's just such a joy in that. And so to have you on, it just warms my heart. I know we all kind of feel that way. It's a little reunion, but love to have you back. I'm sure there'll be more that we need to talk about in the future.
Yeah. Well, I just want to add, I look at all of your faces, and that's the truth about this. So, I mean, who knew that when you got involved in a fight like this, we'd meet people like yourselves, right? I mean, I always tell people, it's like, you have no idea how you will be blessed to stand for truth. Even though the fight might look hard and daunting, you will be so blessed. And we're happy warriors. I mean, here we are. We're happy warriors, regardless of what's going on. Be the happy warrior, because we know, as you said, God wins in the end. But in the interim, we are to be faithful with our calling and our mission, and just keep doing what we're supposed to do, and speak for the truth, and stand winsomely and lovingly, but truthfully, because the truth is a limited commodity these days. And kids are being harmed because of it. They're being lied to. So,
Amen. Well, that concludes our episode of Time for Agape. For this week, we'll be back next week at our regular time next Friday, and hope to see you all then.
That's you.
See ya, everybody.
Bye-bye.